Hi, welcome back. How are you all? Have you had a good weekend? What are you up to at the moment? I can see I've got loads of people who've been commenting in the in the chat box, and it's kind of cool. So shall I just start by just welcoming you all here today? So I'm Louisa Munson, and this is the Feel Good Astrology Sunday show, where I look at the charts of 3 people. I do actually already have my 3 people selected. So if you were hoping that I'd look at your chart tonight, and I haven't already told you I'm going to look at it, I'm going to have to put you on the waiting list for the next one. But, still listen in anyway, because you might, I often find, and I used to find this actually when I was a young teen going to spiritualist churches and to mediumship nights and things like that, that even if I didn't get a message, there was always some reason why I was listening, or there was always some reason why I was there at that particular time. So you may well find that there is something for you here anyway. So before I get going, let's just welcome everybody. So I've got somebody that I'm going to be reading for today. This is Gaining Wisdom, also known as Stuart. Thanks, Louisa. I looked into my Aries sun and Taurus moon, and wow, Aries cool, Taurus cool, but that guy in the middle, just weird, lol. Like I tell my wife, if I find something I'm inspired to do, the hard part has always been getting my foot in front of myself to break my current pattern. But when I commit fully to something, it may be in an odd way how I perform in that commitment, but committed I am. So, well, let's see where we go with this today, Stuart, because I know that this is what you initially sent me. You said, I hope to, sorry if I sound a little bit breathless, by the way. I've just walked from the beach with 2 of my children at quite a fast pace to get back in time. So, because it really matters to do this, I think. So anyway, I hope you get to feeling better. Yeah, I was feeling a little bit poorly last week. As far as my chart goes, I would like to start with Pluto in my first house opposite my Aries sun. With ascendant Virgo and a Taurus moon. Well, this is interesting, Stuart, because I know that you filled out your time, place, and date of birth, and I had it at 6 a.m. When I looked at it, I was saying, hang on a second, that's not ascendant Virgo. And when I switched it to 6 p.m., I got the ascendant Virgo. So it'd be really helpful if you could just confirm if you were born at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. I'm guessing 6 p.m. I think it was just a typo. But anyway, you said, my ascendant Virgo and Taurus moon, born in the evening, yet with strong air, particularly to Gemini. Many aspects to Venus with her in my 5th house, Chiron creeping up my back door. North node opposed the midheaven with a neat little bow with Mercury and Jupiter in my 6th house. Start with whatever pops out for you. I'm confused. And you also then added, meant to say Saturn and Mercury in my 6th house, not Jupiter. Anywho, have a good day. Okay, so there's a lot to be doing for you, Stuart. I've got to establish your time of birth and get really, really clear on that before I go forwards. But anyway, I've also got Colleen's chart that I'm looking at, and it said, Colleen says, hi, Louisa. I'm loving these shows. I did find my chart last night from decades ago, so I can now follow along better. And this is interesting as well. It's a funny theme, actually. I know next to nothing how to interpret. I did find my moon sign is in the sign of Libra. So I rewatched the moon and air signs, which is what I needed, I think. Let me know what you blah. So it's about how to fill in the form. Now, here's the funny thing. And, if ever people talk about Mercury retrograde and say, oh yeah, Mercury retrograde, you've got to really watch it because things get really messy and nobody knows what's going on. Well, the funny thing is, when I looked at Colleen's chart and she told me, oh yeah, my moon is in Libra, I looked at her chart based on her time, place, and date of birth, and it looks like her moon's in Scorpio. So I got back to Colleen as well. So it's like 2 of my 3 people today that I'm looking at, there was a little bit of, what time are they born? So I have actually checked in with Colleen, and Colleen is saying, hi, Louisa, I hope you're having a wonderful Mother's Day. I am. Thank you so much for wishing me that, by the way. It's Mother's Day here in Portugal. But Colleen is now actually saying, I don't think it is Libra. So I tell you what, Colleen, I will give you a little bit of a description of your ascendant, your sun sign with the moon in Libra and the moon in Scorpio to give you that feel, to see which one feels right for you. So we've also got Corinne Dawn Lewis. Hello, Corinne. I don't think I've ever noticed you watching the show before. I've never seen you in the chat room. So thanks for joining us. So excited for this. Thank you. I'm really excited. It's always really lovely when I've got someone new listening in that I've not yet met before. Let us know where you're from and what your interest in astrology is, because I love to tie in anything that can be helpful. The Ancient Mariner, our good old friend. Sun, 2 degrees in Sagittarius. Moon, 16 degrees in Aquarius. Mercury is 12 degrees in Scorpio. Interesting, Ancient Mariner. I'm also a Sagittarius. And one day I will have a look at your chart. If you send me, you can either direct message me or send me an email with your time, date, and place of birth, and I will add you to next week's list or the one after. I'm not entirely sure which one works at the moment. I've also got Nubianette. Good morning, good evening. It's actually 6 p.m. here in Portugal. I don't know what time it is where you are, but thanks for joining us. Got Nora. Hi there. You know, Nora, I've sent you a couple of messages in the YouTube chat to say if you wanted me to look at your chart, you've got to email me your time, place, and date of birth, because I don't think you've done that yet. So if you want to send it to, I mean, you might have changed your mind. You might not want me to have a look at your unmentionables, but it's louisa.tannermunson@gmail.com. And just to be really, really cautious and careful, just in case you have already sent it to me, let me know what your email address is and I will double check, because I have had a situation this week or last week whereby somebody booked a reading with me and it looked like we weren't receiving each other's emails. And again, I put that down to that monkey Mercury. So interesting times. We've got Zoe Kelly's Universe. I will respond to your email later, Zoe. But thank you so much for that. And hi. And Noor saying that's great. I just emailed you information. I'm going to have to use that next week or the week after, Zoe, but I would love to have a look at your chart. And Noor is going to do that as well. So that's fantastic. I haven't actually had a chance to record anything in terms of the forecast for next week. However, here's a few thoughts. Hastily written thoughts for next week. You can see my handwriting's a bit haphazard. So for Monday the 8th then, what I really see, we've got the moon in Sagittarius, and we've got this lovely trine between the moon and Chiron, and also a lovely trine between the moon and Jupiter. You know what that says to me is that we're moving forwards. It's been a really strange week. In fact, I have to say, all of the aspects that I was picking out of all the different planets and stuff, they all look pretty positive, actually. You know, I was looking through my ephemeris and looking through all the different aspects and symbols and things. And a lot of what I was seeing was just really sort of helpful stuff, you know, where we're building things on. So for Monday the 8th, with the moon in Sagittarius, that usually makes us feel a little bit exuberant, a little bit chatty, a little bit over optimistic, sometimes a bit cheeky. But with the moon in Chiron, I think we're going to be, moon in a trine with Chiron, we should be a bit more lighthearted about what's been going on for us in terms of things that have maybe felt a little bit sore or raw before. And also with the trine with Jupiter, we're getting a little bit excited about what we can achieve. It feels like somehow we've unlocked something and we're able to move on. On Tuesday the 9th, it's a little bit frivolous with the moon in an opposition to Venus. That sometimes, you know, we sometimes don't quite get the emotions quite right. We might be a little bit too much and not necessarily, you know, we might be a bit over in our emotions in how well we emote things. Also, we've got the sun in a conjunction with Uranus, which happens once a year. And the sun in a conjunction with Uranus is really unexpected and quite wild. So there is a natural need to be quite wild and frivolous. The good thing is about it, though, is we've got this moon in a sextile to Saturn, which really sort of balances us out. So yes, we're a bit wild, but we're not completely untamed, if that makes sense. So I think that's quite helpful. And also later on, the moon goes into the sign of Capricorn, which is helpful. A bit more grounding. On Wednesday the 10th, we've got a bit of a power thing going on. The moon goes into an opposition with Mars, and that usually heats things right up. You know, people aren't very patient. They tend to get a little bit hot and bothered. And, you know, they kind of snap first and then reflect later. So watch out for that on Wednesday. But we also do have the moon in a lovely trine with Uranus and also a trine with the sun. So even if we are snapping and being a little bit thoughtless is probably a good word. We are actually really trying to just be ourselves, and I think that is really important. So I think Wednesday is quite an authentic day, but one where we need to just watch our patience. Thursday the 11th then, it's quite intense. Intensity, I would say, is the biggest theme of the day, with the moon making her second conjunction to Pluto since Pluto changed signs. Pluto is now retrograde, and you might have seen my show last week about how we might be reconsidering our power plays, because we all have these little power plays that we make. We've also got Venus, the sort of energy of love and connection, struggling a little bit with how to feel free. So, for people in really long-term existing relationships, we might be feeling that tension of, crikey, I was so much more freer when, and it's almost like we're looking for problems a little bit and not being quite so free. On Friday the 12th, we've got the moon changing from the sign of Capricorn and into the sign of Aquarius. And on that day, we've got a couple of quite supportive aspects. In particular, Mercury is in a sextile to Saturn. I always think that's really good for planning and getting things really, really sorted. But for those of you who have been listening in and who follow astrology, you probably already know that Mercury has been retrograde since the 21st of April and is going to be retrograde until the 14th. So it's still a couple of days to go. But it does feel like we are starting to get a bit clearer. Saturday the 13th then, the moon's in Aquarius all day. We've got a lovely sextile between Mercury and Venus, and that's really sort of brotherly and sisterly. Feels pretty good. Venus is also in a lovely trine with Saturn, so it's a really good time to build, just build something with someone that you like, just build trust, hang out, cuddle, whatever it is, but it's a connection day, and it's one with some stability. And then as we get to Sunday the 14th, Mercury goes direct. The moon goes into Pisces, which I'm quite pleased about, because I'm hoping that happens right before my lunar return. And I can tell you what that is. If you want to know what a lunar return is, just write below. Yes, let me know what a lunar return is, and I'll tell you later. But the moon is also in a sextile to Uranus, so it's quite relaxed next Sunday, the 14th. I quite like that. There is, however, a little bit of struggle as well. We've got the moon in a semi-square to Pluto and the moon in a semi-square to Jupiter, and that will have us struggling a little bit around power. So if you can relax on Sunday with pals and leave all the struggle for another day, you'll be fine. But Sunday's not a day to really overthink it next week. So anyway, that's my rough update. Like I said, I think it's actually one of the easiest weeks of May. And if you've listened to my May overview, you'll know full well why I'm saying that. The following week, it starts to ramp up. And then the last week, it's like, oh, gosh. So what else have we got going on here? We've got a few more comments coming in. So Zoe's going to send me her details. That's great. Look forward to that. Concept Genius. Hello. Good afternoon. That's a boa tarde. Boa tarde is good afternoon Portuguese. But Concept Genius, I know, is a fellow Brit. We've got the Global Nobles. Boa tarde a todos. That's good afternoon to everyone. Ancient Mariner saying, got a hop as I have an emergency session with my trauma counsellor following yesterday's coronation. Hope everyone has had a good week, Wednesday notwithstanding. That's fantastic. I love your sense of humour. Thank you for stopping by and sharing some of your joy. I love that. Newbienet saying, what's the lunar return? Okay. At the time, place, and date of your birth, the moon will be in a particular place. And let's say my moon is at 9 degrees 50 in the sign of Pisces. Every month, the moon will go through all the different signs of the zodiac. And in each sign, there's 30 degrees. So at some point in the whole month ahead, the moon is going to connect with the exact place it was in at the time, place, and date of your birth. And when that happens, astrologers can draw up a chart called the lunar return chart. It's when the moon lunar cycle returns back to where it was at the time, place, and date of your birth. And what it represents is your emotional month ahead. And so with all of my monthly clients, each month that the moon returns to the place it was in at the time, place, and date of birth, I draw up a reading for them, and I record a 20-minute update just to give them a sense of what's coming for them in the month ahead. And the returns that most people do are the solar returns. So it's when the sun gets back to where it was at the time, place, and date of their birth. So for instance, if you're born on the 22nd of June, around that time, not necessarily on the 22nd of June, it might be on the 21st or it might be on the 23rd, but every year when when the sun gets back to, say, whatever it was, like if you're born at, I don't know, 0 degrees 23 in the sign of Cancer, when the sun gets back to that position, that exact position, a new chart is generated and it gives you your year ahead chart. We also do things like Saturn return charts. Now, Saturn, when you have your Saturn return, it's roughly around 28 and a half to 29 and a half in terms of your age. So you have your first Saturn return at the end of your 20s, and then you have your second Saturn return roughly around the age of 58. You have your Chiron return at 51. You have your Jupiter return every 11 to 12 years. But each of these signifies another lap of something. So the lunar return, your monthly one, is really like your emotional tempo, your temperature for the month ahead, what's new, what's not, what's coming in, what's leaving. And I throw in all sorts of asteroids to do with what's going on with your life. Your yearly one really gives you your forecast for the year ahead. Your Jupiter one shows what kind of growth cycle you're going into, and Saturn shows how you're closing things down and using more discernment. So there's all sorts of different tools that we use, but the lunar return is a really good one, and I use it all the time. So hopefully that made sense. And yeah, so the reason I was saying I hope Mercury goes retrograde, goes direct before the moon goes into Pisces, that's because my moon's in Pisces. And when I start my lunar return this month, I hope that Mercury is not retrograde. So that's where that comment came from. Zoe is saying, is Uranus good? Do you know what? I always think that planets have a good and a negative expression. And, like Saturn and Pluto are really like the party poopers of the solar system. They get a really bad rap, and Mars does as well. Saturn and Mars are known as the malefics. They're known as being badasses, and they can show you where you're having a bit of a bad time. But you know what? Even Saturn can be good. I was saying to somebody this morning, I was reading their chart, and I can see that somebody's coming into this really strong Saturn time. And I always think of Saturn as a bit of a parent. And, as most of you know, you can have a really nurturing parent, like a great elder that inspires you and leads you and guides you. Like they're almost like a guide by the side. Or you can have this kind of horrible, disempowering parent that is always like, like pushing you down. And I think Saturn can, show you two sides of the same coin, which is the energy of responsibility, the energy of parenthood, the energy of eldership. And so when I look at Saturn in somebody's chart, I might look to see if they've got good aspects. Like, is your Saturn helpfully supported, or is it negatively supported with lots of squares and oppositions? Now you're asking me about Uranus. I would say Uranus is like at some level, it's the planet that represents consciousness. And of course, I love consciousness. Anything to do with consciousness, I think it's fab. Uranus is about channeling. It's about sudden downloads of information. It's like a thunderbolt coming across the sky and into your head, and it can inspire you and it can delight you. But of course, the negative side of that is sudden change, sudden chaos. It's almost like an earthquake. It's like a hurricane. It breezes through your life and it rips off all the facades. Uranus is an initiator of change. And for those people that have the sort of inner recipe, that love a bit of change in their life, they'll flow with it. But even they get a bit peed off if they go through a ton of Uranus stuff, and it gets tiring. You know, we all need a bit of security sometimes. But for people that are really secure and really like their life to be really stable, really calm, very predictable, they really struggle with their Uranus function. So it's neither good nor bad. I guess it really depends on your perspective. So I hope that was helpful. Nora is saying thank you. I look forward to getting your details. Colleen saying next Sunday is Mother's Day in the US. So perfect. Oh, Carl's joining me. He's at Leclerc. Can you get me some of that nice sushi, please? And some wine. Thanks. And Sarah's saying, you're awesome at explaining things, Louisa. Well, thank you very much. I will confess, I did work as an induction trainer for 15 years for banking and insurance. And to be able to make banking concepts and foreign exchange and insurance exciting for people who had no experience of it, it was quite a feat. So that might be why I like to put things into context for people. And then after that, I had my own company where I was just delivering training and stuff. And I love it. So it's what I love doing. Willie B is saying, good afternoon. I'm flushing now. Good afternoon. If Saturn and Mars are retrograded in the natal chart, do you think the energy is worse or dampened down a bit? That's a great question. And there's so many different ways I could answer that, Willie B. I would actually say I would have to look at your chart because, well, first of all, this is a bit of a slightly longer explanation. The first thing that occurs to me is, and you know, there'll be a blog piece that comes out every year, guaranteed by people. And I've even done it myself about 7 years ago. I remember doing a blog piece and saying, oh my God, there's 7 planets retrograde. What's that going to mean? But actually, what I've realized since is that every year there'll be a time when there's a lot of planets retrograde at the same time, because Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, so five of our slower moving planets, they all go retrograde every year without fail from our perspective here on Earth. And they go retrograde for anything between 5 and 7 months. Now, that's a long time. And so if you've got 5 planets that are potentially going retrograde for 5 months of the year, there's going to be times when they all coincide and they're retrograde. Also, you've got Chiron that I didn't include in that list, and that goes retrograde. Then you've also got Mercury. Now, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year for approximately 3.5 weeks, 3 to 3.5 weeks. So, you know, it's not unheard of to have Mercury retrograde. Now, Mars and Venus, they go retrograde every couple of years. So they don't go retrograde every year. And I always think they're slightly harder. So if we were to, if I had a diagram, it'd be really helpful. So I'm just going to have to like use my fingers here. So if we imagine this noggin here, my head in the middle is us on Earth. And on this side, we've got the personal planets. So we've got, this is looking hideous, but we've got Mars, sorry, we've got Venus and Mercury here. We've got Mars this side, and then we've got all of the outer planets. So it's kind of like we're going through the solar system this way, all the way out to here. As you can see, I've never done this before. But Mercury and Venus, they're known as personal planets, as is Mars, just the other side of Earth. Then they're known as having a real sort of like personal effect on us. So when they go retrograde, it seems to kind of really pull at our personality somehow. It feels personal. When the outer planets go retrograde, they tend to affect the consciousness of humanity. And so they might link into your chart, but they're not really there to get at you. They're there to sort of change the pace somewhat. So when we have Venus and Mars go retrograde every couple of years, and at the moment they seem to be going, we've got Venus going retrograde in the summer, and she's going to be retrograde for, I think, 44 days, I think off the top of my head, or 40 days, something like that. She's going retrograde. When she goes retrograde, our value systems get really bad to interpret. We're not very good at them. And then Mars will be going retrograde, I think, towards the end of the year or maybe into next year. But like the last time they both went retrograde, it was in the same year. And that was really quite tough because, you know, we're all personally impacted. So anyway, back to your question, Willie B, which wasn't so, you know, I've gone off topic a little bit, as anyone with Sagittarius, Moon in Pisces might. If Saturn and Mars are retrograded in the natal chart, do you think the energy is worse or damped down a bit? First of all, I think if Mars is retrograde, that is quite rare in comparison to all the other retrogrades, as is Venus retrograde, you know, because they only happen every 2 years and they happen for quite a short space of time, say like 4 weeks or, you know, around that. You know, it's not that common. So to have Mars retrograde, I'm not going to say it's unfortunate because I don't want to judge it, you know, as unfortunate or not. I think if you're born with it, you kind of have an understanding of that energy. And I would have to look at Saturn and Mars in your chart together, you know, like how do they work? Are they supporting each other or not? And I'd want to see what the benefics are doing and how your sun is aspected. So what I would do is I would say, don't get bogged down if you've got loads of retrogrades or even 2 retrogrades. Just try and pick up this sort of energy of the picture. It would be really interesting, actually, in these charts that I'm looking at tonight, to see if anyone's got retrogrades and how many they've got, and I'll comment on it. But I don't tend to comment so much on the retrograde positions of people's planets unless they're being aspected by something, you know, and by that I mean unless they've got a planet kind of moving over that space where they exist. I don't pay too much attention to it. You know, I think we've got to be really careful about being too fatalistic. I think I've mentioned before that years ago I was reading about what it's like to have Mars in, the Moon in Pisces, and I've got Mercury in Sagittarius, and that's in its detriment. You know, and when you read about some of your things in your chart and you hear that they've got this bad reputation, it can be quite deleterious. You might get the feeling that there's something wrong with you. So I would say let's have a look at your chart. If you send me your time, place, and date of birth, and I'll put you on the list. And then the next time I do one of these, or the next time your spot comes up, I'll have a look for you. But I always like to think of charts and say, what if? And this is, Sarah might laugh at this phrase, Sarah Taylor. What if the wrongness of you is actually the rightness of you? Because when we look at our charts, we often see that the things that make us different are the things that are really special about us. So there you go. Zoe's saying it was helpful. I'm not sure about that long ramble, but KA is saying, would love for you to read my chart for this week. Do I post my info here? Thank you for that, KA. I'm actually going to put it on my list, and it's a first come, first served list. So I'll be reviewing it at the end, and I'll let you know. If you send me your email address, the best thing you can do actually is drop me a message via email, and I will respond at some point, but it's louisa.tannermunson@gmail.com, and I'll put you on the list because I would love to have a look for you. So anyway, should we crack on with it? I've been prattling on for quite some time, and I know you guys, you know, it's a Sunday. You've all got things to do as well. So let me just get the right screen up, which is a bit of a challenge for me, I have to say, especially while I've got people watching. That's always a bit nerve-wracking. Okay, I think I've got it. Let's see. Aha. Okay, so the first chart I'm going to have a look at is Stuart's chart. Now, just going to check back in with Stuart. Stuart, can I just double check that the birth time for you is 6 p.m. on the 27th of March, 1974? Because that's the only time that makes sense when you said you've got your ascendant in the sign of Virgo. So that would be really helpful if you could just confirm that for me. Right, where's the comments? Now, right at the start, Stuart, you said, I looked into my Aries sun. Yep. And Taurus moon. And wow, Aries cool, Taurus cool, but that guy in the middle, just weird. Oh, the guy in the middle. Okay, right. Let's see if I can understand that and interpret that for you. So here's your, hopefully you can all see my mouse because it's a little bit kind of weird. Otherwise, I'm just like talking about a screen. You have no idea what part I'm looking at. And I will describe it as a clock face. So I'm looking at his sun right now, which looks a little bit like a bosom. As one of my children perfectly put it. It's like, oh, look, there's a booby on that chart. But anyway, look, there's the symbol for the sun, and it's at about 2:30 on a clock front, and you can see it's in the sign of Aries. So this is Stuart's birth chart. He's got his sun there in the, see this 7 in the middle? That's the 7th house. This area is associated with partnerships, and basically everyone that we project onto. You know, a lot of traditional astrologers say that the 7th house is partnerships, friendships, enemies. It's the way I see it is like the 1st house is, this is everything about you. And then the 7th house is everything outside of you that is encapsulated in another person. So it really could be your partner, it could be your friends, it could be your family sometimes as well. It could be your enemies, people you don't like, because often they're the same people. And I also think it's like the projection screen of you. If you think this is you here, Stuart, this is like this ascendant, I think always represents you being born into the world. Boom, there you are, you know. And then this is how you're perceiving everyone outside of yourself. And at first, as a baby, as anyone that's had children here will know, like as a new baby, they don't even know that they're separate from you for a long time. If you're a mum, you know, and you've delivered a baby, your baby has no idea that they're not attached to you or part of you for quite a long time. And then all of a sudden they start to get this sense that there is something outside of them and that you exist on the outside of them. And they're projecting onto you the whole time. And so I think the 7th house is really important. Now, the sun here is, you know, how your personality sort of expresses itself. And so even though your ascendant is in the sign of Virgo, Stuart, which is pretty thoughtful, very kind of tidy. You want to kind of neaten everything up. You want to explain everything. You want everything to be quite fit for purpose. The Virgoan energy often has this real need to cross the T's, dot the I's, and make everything make sense. Because it's, you know, we're living in a world that really doesn't make much sense. And I would say, you know, for people with a very strong Virgo leaning, it's very easy when you can fit into the real world. But if you're slightly different and you don't quite see that the real world fits in, it creates a lot of agony for a lot of Virgoans, because, you know, there is this sense of, oh, crikey, well, if that doesn't work, what is the real model of the world? And, you know, your need for perfection in understanding that is really difficult. Now, your descendant starts in, this is at 3 o'clock. The descendant is, you know, like that point of everyone but you. And yours is in the sign of Pisces. And that's opening the door to this 7th house that describes the kind of people that you draw into your life. And having the sun here, I think, is an indication that you kind of draw in a lot of personalities into your world. In particular, people who've got quite a good sense of who they are. You know, the sign of Aries is quite direct and quite informal and pretty energetic. They're quite sure and certain of themselves. And it's quite possible that you're projecting that onto other people, you know, that you see that other people are more certain than you and much less wavering than you are. But what I would actually say is maybe, you know, what you're seeing in other people is what you already have in yourself, that you're more certain than you realize. And what I would actually back that up with is the moon in Taurus. They tend to be pretty certain of themselves. You know, the moon in Taurus is very, very stable. The moon here is like your emotional expressions, the way your psyche like it kind of reveals itself. It's very grounded in the sign of Taurus. You know, Taurus is, you know, very natural, very earthy. And then, the connection between your moon and your ascendant, it's really nicely balanced. I would say you probably find yourself in the right place at the right time. And if that's nature, that's really good. And I would say probably that the importance of food and nutrition is really like a key thing for you with these two earthy things here. It's really important that your body enjoys the sensuousness of feeling great in your body that not everyone else has. Lots of people aren't so embodied. They're in their heads or they're sort of up in the clouds sometimes, and they forget to be in their body. Whereas for you, you really are in your body. You really feel things. And so it's important that you look after your body more so than other people. But your moon in the ninth house is really lovely. I love that because it gives you this desire to explore feeling and to explore emotion and sentiments through a much bigger lens. A lot of people, they're judging their feelings based on the upbringing they've had, and what was common to them. But here, even though your moon's in Taurus, which is quite stable, you're actually looking at things from an uncommon, an unknown frame of reference. You're always experiencing new things. There's a need to explore new things in a very stable way to really understand things. And the ninth house really rules our spirituality, our philosophies, our politics, how well read we are. It's about furthering your understanding of the world, which I really love. Now, that guy in the middle between the sun and the moon is Chiron. And it was Chiron that you were asking me about. So if I just quickly, I know I read out what you were putting earlier. You said, I would like to start with Pluto in my first house, opposite my Aries sun, with my ascendant Virgo and Taurus moon. Many aspects to Venus and her in my fifth house, Chiron creeping in my back door north node opposed to my midheaven. That's a lot. Okay, so let's talk about your Pluto in the first house opposite your sun, and then I'll see where I go from there. So here's your Pluto in the first house. Now, Pluto, for those of you that have watched a little bit or listened to other sort of bits and read up about Pluto, you'll know that Pluto is sometimes known as a bit of a dark destroyer. He's not easy to understand. Pluto shows us the mystery of control and power and how we crave. It's almost like the unmet demands of a toddler. If you've known any toddlers, we've all been one, but thankfully we can't remember being a toddler. But if you've seen some of those funny memes on Facebook or Twitter of toddlers completely losing their shit, you'll understand the power of Pluto, because Pluto is that unmet need where we completely go bananas and we need control, and there's no real rational reason for it, but that sense of needing that control is there. Well, Pluto is that toddler, and yours is in the sign of Libra. And it's in the early degrees of Libra, and it's very much associated with the Venus energy of Libra. It's the first decan, the first 10 degrees of Libra that your Pluto's in. So your Pluto, your need to control, is very much about the idea of the perfect love story. I would imagine that you've come into this world, and I know you're actually born the same year as me as well, 74. Yeah, we've both got our Pluto in this kind of romantic part of Libra, where we've been born with this idea that you don't have to marry for circumstance, and maybe some of the boomers did that. They were slightly less certain about the world, and they made their marriage decisions, and they were quite balanced about it. Whereas by the time Pluto was in our sign, in the sign of Libra, sorry, in the mainly in the early 70s, what you found here is that we're looking for this love story. We're looking for the idea of number one, and we're looking for this idea of love conquering all. We've got a lot of this programming going on, and yours is right in your first house, which is very much about your identity. And your Pluto is in opposition to the sun. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because Pluto and the sun, like the sun is your personality and how you express it. And at some level, you're projecting onto other people what you do yourself, which is you're a lot more dynamic than you realize. You're a lot more certain than you realize, and possibly trying to hide some of that certainty. And hence we've got this lovely opposition, because Pluto in a conjunction with the sun, they have no problems letting people know what they think. Or Pluto with the moon in a conjunction, they often let people know what their feelings are. People have a very strong feeling and sometimes feel a bit manipulated by them, because they're very good at understanding feelings and letting their emotional feelings take precedence and prominence. But you've got this need to have control, which we all do. It's completely normal. And you're trying to pretend you don't at some level. And there's a conflict. And so what I see really easing this is to really find ownership of what you really need and what you don't. And at first, as you get clearer with this, you'll probably get into all sorts of confusion, because you'll say, oh, I really, really want this. And at the same time, realize that as you're clearly articulating what you want, it sounds unreasonable, because you can't control what other people think or do or say, or that they will love you forever. We can't do that. And yet at some point, we've got this little toddler inside us that absolutely wants that and demands that. So it's a bit like, how do you understand? How can you coax your inner toddler and say, it's okay? It's absolutely okay. So there's a bit of that going on. Now, what I'm really quite excited about for you, Stuart, is that Pluto's current position, okay, he's backing into the sign of Capricorn, but Pluto is coming into this, well, it's already in a trine with your Pluto. So whatever has been going on with your Pluto is coming to a time where it can be powerful. So I actually think, as you realize you're not going to take over the world and, let your toddler brain go unchecked, it's okay. It's actually safe for you to have your needs met now. It's safe for you to say, you know what, actually, I'm 49. I feel safe to say, actually, this is what I'm hoping for in life. And I hope you can meet that with me. And I invite you to join me on it. I'm engaging with that. Let's do it, And that if the answer you get back is no, then you're like, okay, well, you know what? I'm still going to carry on my journey, and I'm still going to be me. And, it's kind of like a resiliency. It's like you're brave enough and vulnerable enough to have your needs met. And you're okay if the people you want to meet your needs with you aren't going to do that. So I really see that it's a time when you're more able to engage others. And, you're only engaging them for the simple reason that you're asking. And so for many people, in particular with your Pluto in opposition to the sun, you've probably not been very good at asking people to engage with you. So when you probably have had a go at it, it's come out probably passive aggressively. So this is the time now, Stuart, that you're coming into, and Pluto's just going to be perfecting this trine for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And it's actually a time of moving forwards for you. It's a time of feeling much more secure in yourself emotionally, because what you're building on is a strong understanding of who you are. Now, your Chiron is in opposition to Uranus. And Chiron is in the 8th house. The 8th house is interesting. It's a place of shame, blame, guilt, anger, everybody else's values that you've been living your life to somehow work on. And your Uranus in the 2nd house is interesting, because people with Uranus in the 2nd house really don't want people telling them what to do. People with Pluto in the 1st house don't want people telling them what to do. So there's a lot of independence there. And of course, one of the issues you'd have probably found in trying to lead and engage people to work with you is that when push comes to shove, that when you are working with people, you might have to listen to them too and share some of it. So I think typically you've probably rebelled a little bit and may well have found that it's easier to forge your own path. But of course, when you forge your own path, you can sometimes not have to attend to the sort of values and the moral things that other people put on you, but they still stay there. So what I would say is you're actually coming into quite a resilient time. And I would urge you to look at the bits you haven't looked at up till now through fear that people might leave you or say, oh my God, you're a control freak. I would say, relax, you're going to be okay. Right now, Saturn is over your Jupiter, and later on this year, it will be connecting with your Mercury. And then like next year, it's going to be going over your descendant. So you might find that the people around you are a little bit more terse and possibly a little bit sort of depressed. You know, they're not sort of like full of beans like they usually are, but you're actually working towards a much greater purpose for yourself. I think this is actually quite useful. And Jupiter is changing signs on the 16th, is going into the sign of Taurus. Over the next year and a half, you've got like Uranus in your ninth house, you've got Jupiter in your ninth house. Around April, the end of April next year, when Uranus and Jupiter are together in a very close alignment with your moon, that looks like a real time to go forwards with something quite daring, quite bold, quite extraordinary. So anyway, I'm going to leave that there. I hope that was helpful. Let's see if there's any comments coming in for this. KA saying, for anyone else who needs it, it's in the video description as well. Okay, thank you. Willie B, thanks for the explanation. That makes me feel better. Some of the astrology books make you feel like you're doomed when you read the retrograde descriptions. Yeah, don't worry about that. So anyway, that was me having a look at Stuart's chart. Let's now have a look at the next one, which is Colleen's. Now, again, so Colleen's chart was the second chart that I wasn't quite sure about the time of birth because, Colleen was saying that her moon was probably in the sign of Libra. But when I checked against her time, place and date of birth, it came up as Scorpio. So here we've got a very sensitive little bean. The moon's in the sign of Pisces. One of the things that I'm really aware of with people with very strong Pisces is that Saturn is in the sign of Pisces now, and Saturn can give us a bit of a hard time, but I want to have a really good look at this. We've got the moon in Scorpio. That's interesting. Hang on one second. Yeah, okay. I'm actually working right now. And you don't realize, but look, you're on screen. Can you see that? You're going to say hello?
It's an emergency. We need you.
What?
We need you. It's an emergency.
An emergency? Seriously?
So,
Oh.
as soon as he woke up,
Okay. I need to go to an emergency. Please excuse me for 5 minutes or so. It's not a life or death situation, is it? Okay. Daddy hasn't come back home with the eldest child yet, but I will be back in a second. I will be back to look at Colleen's chart. Forgive me, one sec. Okay.
real bad. Okay. I tried helping that. I'll tell him that he's also lying. He's lying now.
Oh, hello. Thank you for that. Sorry about that. Whew. That's all the fun of having a family, isn't it? And having a business where you work from home. So I was very lucky there. I thought I had a code brown situation there with a bit of a messy poo or something. And it was just, it wasn't anything that bad. Hello. I'm out of breath now from running around, and everything is okay. We've just got a slightly older toddler who is out of nappies now, but had fallen asleep and woken up and wet himself. So all sorted. We've got an oh no, lol. I think most people here, if you've had kids, you've probably been through this, haven't you? And we absolutely must attend to their upset first. Or else they're going to end up with like loads of psychological issues, and it'd be so weird, wouldn't it, me talking about pain and anguish and stuff in our charts whilst ignoring my own kids' cries for help. But Daddy's on his way home and we've got everything that we need. And everything is okay. Right. So anyway, what I was saying with Colleen is she's got this lovely, lovely trine here between the sun and the moon and also Uranus. Now, this makes Colleen super duper intuitive. They're all in the water signs. And so, the sun in the sign of Pisces is really kind of dreamy and gentle and sort of really creative. And, like Colleen probably doesn't always know exactly what she's wanting to create, but there is this sense of something building in her. And then she's got this lovely moon in Scorpio, which is not always easy. I've got quite a few clients with their moon in Scorpio, and it's quite intense. So she has these really intense feelings. And then Uranus in the sign of Cancer, like Uranus, like I mentioned when I was explaining, my thoughts about it to Zoe, I was saying it's that channeling planet. And the water signs are just so receptive. So this is what's known as a grand trine. And they don't pop up that frequently. I mean, I throw a lot of different asteroids into people's charts, and then the more things you put in a chart, the more chance you have of having a grand trine. But Colleen's actually got one just through the placement of her planets. So this is really nice. You've got a lovely grand trine, and it's going from the 12th house. The 12th house here is like that place of our unconscious mind. And then the 7th house, which is about relationships, and then the 4th house at the bottom. So, your intuition, I think, is probably quite private. I'm sure people know that about you, but, Uranus at home, it's interesting, like Uranus in the 4th house isn't always a comfortable place to have it, because the 4th house often shows us our childhood and how we grew up, and a lot about our inner psychology because of our childhood. And so having something quite disruptive like Uranus in there can show sometimes somebody that's moved around a lot and who didn't find much stability from the parents, or that her parents were slightly unusual. It can show a very strong sort of like new age leaning, or people that were very sort of devout on their consciousness and really thinking things through. But it could be also that her parents were just slightly different, but Uranus in the 4th house can be quite disruptive, and her Uranus is really, really close to the IC. I'm looking here at 6 o'clock. That's quite tricky, because when one of these passing planets, because they're always moving, these green ones, when one of these planets goes over this angle here, the IC, not only does it mean something here, but it's already lining up to Uranus, which gives it a double meaning. Then it's also reacting to the midheaven as well. And if she's got anything else at 11 to 14 degrees, if something crosses over here, it's going to be aspecting her Jupiter, which is just at 16 degrees, but it would be aspecting Also, when something goes over here, it's also going into a trine energy with her sun and a trine energy with her moon. Now, these two will really support anything that kicks off here, which is really quite useful. But I would imagine that when there are big changes in Colleen's life, in particular in terms of where she lives, because the IC is about the home and how she feels about her home, then it creates a big change for her. So I would imagine lots of big moves. And I just happen to know that Colleen is interested in moving to Portugal. And I don't know if it's the only place. There might be a few different possibilities for Colleen, but it often gives a bit of a striving for something a lot more. But sometimes not being able to articulate what we're feeling. The 12th house here, Colleen has got her Mars, her Pallas Athena, Juno, Mercury, and the Sun in the 12th house. And I think I mentioned in a recent show that planets in the 12th house often do show us somebody who moves and ends up spending her days somewhere a really long way from home. So, but the 12th house is also the place of our unconscious mind. And so there's a lot of different things in there that's almost in her blind spot. It's in that place that she can't really see it's like that place she can't really see about herself, but everyone else can see it, but she can't. So it's quite interesting. And then she's got, Neptune right on her descendant, and also Saturn on her descendant. Neptune and Saturn in a conjunction is pretty interesting. And then also the moon and all of this in her 7th house. I would imagine that Colleen's relationships have been probably quite up and down over the years. Neptune often gives us a striving for something we can't put our fingers on. Neptune is one of the rulers of Pisces, and it's really quite, it's kind of really open. It's very hard to put our finger on what it is that's going on. I would imagine that Colleen has attracted a lot of people with a Neptunian energy. And often the people that are reflected here are the ones who are showing things that we can't accept about in ourselves, but are also the description here can also describe the kinds of issues that come up in the people that we're attracting. So Neptune often shows up with drugs, drink, depression, and sort of over creative minds, people who are so creative that you almost can't satisfy it. When a bit like how you hear about these like famous musicians or actors, and they're just never satisfied. They can't quite achieve what it is that they're dreaming with their big imagination. And so everything else nothing really satisfies them. And they're always in that sort of constant loop of not being in their body and always just being slightly in a different place. And it's like they can't quite make up that gap. And so I imagine that you've attracted quite a few idealistic people, Colleen, really creative people, really idealistic people that can't quite live up to their promise, and then who kind of fall down a little bit and need buoying up. And with Saturn there as well, it can often show sort of disappointment with what you're doing creatively. Now, of course, if you remember what I was saying to Stuart earlier, I also said that what shows up in the 7th shows what we can't see about ourselves. So I think you're probably attracting these people because there's that aspect in you too. And I know you're a creative person. I know you do your art. And I know you're very spiritual as well. So I would imagine that along the way, these people have almost been the fall guy for you a little bit, like they have the problems for you. So you don't have to experience it, but you can coach them through it. And whilst you're coaching them through it and helping them through it, you're actually helping yourself at the same time, which is really helpful. And so what usually happens here in the 7th house as well is the people that come into our lives are usually the negative expression of those planets for the first 30 years of our life, or 40, sometimes forever. But like once we get a handle on it, and once we're handling it ourselves in our own reflection, once you can accept that you might be disappointed with your creative promise forever, and you just have to live with it, because we're human and we all have to live with the imperfection of what it is to be human. Once you get to grips with it, you'll then start to meet the beautiful side of the Neptune and Saturn conjunction, which is highly spiritually balanced people. You know, it would be people who love themselves irrespective of whether they achieve the creative idealism that they seek. There'll be people who can see a flawed world but still know that they belong here. And so I think the more you can accept this aspect of others and also accept how it is in yourself, the quicker you'll feel much more grounded and able to move. I think I went off on one there a little bit. I hope that's okay so far, Colleen. Let me just see if there's any comments coming in. Oh, that's always fun. So Colleen saying breathe. Thank you. Yeah, I do need to breathe. That's fun. I remember those days. Oh, Corinne, I'm glad you're through the nappy stages. This is our last one. This is our smallest one and proudest one. So he's very pleased that I changed his nappy. Oh, not his nappy, but his pants. Colleen Murphy, family first, absolutely. Wow, spot on. That's good. And there's my husband saying wine and sushi incoming. That's great. Thank you. Okay, let's read a little bit more then, and then I'll look at the last chart. And then I'll go and soothe those feelings downstairs. So what I really like about your chart, Colleen, and what I see as being very, very useful is this Jupiter here. You know, Jupiter is coming into the sign of Taurus. He's moving into sign of Taurus next week on Monday, I think, Monday the 16th. And that's marking, you know, I was talking about returns earlier in the show, that when a planet comes back to the place it was in at the time, place, and date of birth, it represents something really strong and positive. Well, Colleen is coming into her Jupiter return. And let me just tell you when it is. So I'm looking through these. So as you can see here, Colleen's Jupiter is at 16 degrees 35 in the sign of Taurus. So I'm looking in my ephemeris. I don't know if you can see that. It almost gets to there. The closest it gets to there, to your birth Jupiter, is September 2023, when it gets up to 15 degrees 35, and then Jupiter goes retrograde, and Jupiter goes, so Jupiter is moving, it goes from here to here by September, and then starts going backwards. Let me just trace this back. And then at New Year, Jupiter gets all the way back to here. So it doesn't get that far really, just moves like 10 degrees. And then Jupiter rushes forwards. And then by the end of March 2024, Jupiter is in its full return position for Colleen. Now, what does a Jupiter return represent? Well, Jupiter's a planet of expansion, growth, optimism, hope, and also luck and opportunity. It's really seen. It's one of the benefics, and it's really great actually, because the other benefic is Venus, and you've got both of them in your first house, which is about your body and your personality, like your outer personality, what people see about you. It's very much about your identity, which is very much about peace and love and hope and optimism. You're probably a super nice person. My interactions with you have all been very pleasing. And you've also got your ascendant in the sign of Aries, which doesn't come across so much across social media, because Aries are usually quite direct. But I would imagine that your watery side and your Venus very much in your first house, and your Jupiter in the first house really sort of mitigate some of the directness of your ascendant in the sign of Aries. But yeah, Jupiter anyway is about hope and optimism. Negative side of Jupiter is that because it's so much about growth, it can represent inflammation. So it can show where things grow too fast and become a bit toxic. If you've got an emotional situation heading into September, or like March of 2024, if there's something that's out of control, then Jupiter's just going to make it so much more out of control. However, what I see is you've got this growth period. Now, it takes Jupiter 11.8 years, I think, off the top of my head, to get back round to where he is at the time, place, and date of your birth. And every time he does that, it's pretty special. So what I would say to you, and I'm going to be writing a blog piece or recording something in the next week about Jupiter, and I'm going to track back to like 11, 12 years ago to when Jupiter was last in the sign of Taurus, and I'll give those dates. And what I would suggest to you, Colleen, is that you look back at the last 2 times that Jupiter went through your first house, because it will give you a clear idea of how you expanded. I would be looking at how you expanded your personality, your personal identity. Hello, Mr. M. Daddy's home. That's good. So yeah, look at how your personality and your personal identity expanded during those times. What were you hopeful about? How did you reset your life and your momentum during that time? Because it will be really beneficial. And what you're learning right now and for the following year, even though you're born in 1953, so you probably aren't thinking, oh, I want to be working and earning a living for the next 30 years or so. You might be wanting to put your feet up a little bit and not have to bust a gut so much. But after Jupiter is in your first house, which is boosting your personal identity, it's going to go into your second house. And the second house is that place of money and resources. And as Jupiter goes through that, it's seen as being quite a lucky time. So what you might be doing over this next course of a year, year and a half, is setting up how you can manage your income in year 2 to year 3, and so on and so forth. So any opportunities that you're hoping to take in terms of enhancing, changing, expanding your personal identity are somehow setting you up for a more secure future. So I would definitely be paying attention to that. Now, at the same time, and this is what I first mentioned when I looked at this, is you've got Saturn going through here. And let me just tell you, when Saturn's going over your sun, just flicking ahead quickly, it's going to be over your sun in 2024, April 2024, so March, April time. So at the same time that you've got your Jupiter return, you've also got Saturn going over your sun, which is really quite... So you're expanding, but Saturn is saying, hang on, watch out how you're expanding. Let's be sensible about it. So what I would say is, if this is the time that you're planning on moving away, it's actually a really good time. You know, it's a fantastic time, in fact, and you might want to give it a practice run this summer, coming up until September. That might represent a time when you have a go at trying it out, or starting to communicate what it is that you're doing. But by next spring, that it looks like your personal identity is changing and shifting. And of course, a new country or a new home would absolutely do that, as would new friendships and new networks and stuff. So I see lots of big positive change coming for you. I hope that's helpful. Let's just see if there's any more. I didn't realize the wine and sushi incoming comment was on the screen all that time. So I hope that was useful. Last one then, I'm going to pay a bit of attention to this last chart for my friend Jenny. Now, Jenny's got quite a lot of stuff going on at the moment, and it's not very easy. It's quite shocking. And Jenny and I share something actually in our charts, and that is we've both got our ascendant in the sign of Scorpio. We've both got our Uranus in the sign of Scorpio, and our Uranuses are very, very close to our ascendant. So when something shocking is going on, it's usually really affecting us. People with Uranus really close to their personal identity often, especially when it's in the 12th house, like it is for both of us, we're often having these kind of unconscious shocks. We often feel it before it happens, which is a bit tricky. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying we've got this slight thing, that we're sharing at the moment is with our ascendant, and anyone with their ascendant in the sign of Scorpio, if it's early on, and mine's around about 9 degrees, so I've gone through some of this shock already, thankfully. But we've got Saturn, like Saturn is going through the sign of Pisces, and we've got Uranus going through the sign of Taurus. And so anyone with their ascendant in the sign of Scorpio, if they've got their IC, like their angle to do with the home, in the sign of Pisces, they are going to be experiencing Saturn going over this point of the home, and also Uranus going over the point of other people at the same time, or it's kind of coordinating at the same time. These angles are really important markers in our charts, and they really show us they really are. I really think of them as the north, south, east, and west of our charts. It's really great if we can stay in the center here and be really sort of like grounded and think, okay, I don't want to be too far over this way because this is my personality and that's where I'm really driving and forcing things. Don't want to be over this side in the descendant, because if I am, then I'm really being driven by other people and putting all of my energies there. You don't want to be up here in the top, in the part of your career or in the public side of your life, because you're then not attending to what's going on at home. But if you've got all of your energy down here in the home, how the hell can you possibly start making a living and raising your profile and your status? So, this center point really is where everything has to come from. It's like our grounded base. And so with Saturn here coming into an alignment with her IC, which is the angle to do with the home, it's creating it's creating a difficulty. I have to say, I've got two of your charts, and I'm not entirely sure if I've selected the right one. They've got a slight time difference, and I think it's because you've given me two different times of birth, and I've probably forgotten to delete one. I'm not sure if I've got the right one, because your angle to, like, your IC angle might actually be closer to here, off the top of my head. But I know that you've got Saturn really in, coming into this alignment here. And as Saturn comes into the lowest part of our chart, it often represents a time when we feel absolutely worn out and empty. It's like, where are all of my resources? They've gone. It's like, okay, I'm done with this. Enough already. When I last had Saturn going through this part of my chart, like, it takes Saturn, talking about returns, it takes Saturn 29 approximately years to go all the way round and to come back to the same point. So if you know how it went last time, and I remember when Saturn went past this part of my chart last time, I got really, really sick and I was off school. And the doctors all said, oh no, it's made up. It doesn't exist, what's going on for you. And of course, then I went through this cycle of self-devaluation, and when you've worked your butt off at school, you've got a good reputation at school, and then all of a sudden, through no real fault of your own, you're being told you're lying, you're skipping school, it's that kind of thing. It's like a real self-devaluation. And I could see it coming this time round. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to let that happen. But it can sometimes arrive in different ways. Now, this angle is to do with the home. And when Saturn gets this point, it can also show where your home runs out of steam, when your home runs out of energy, when it feels like everything to do with your home is just absolutely crumpling in. It almost feels like, where is my home? And I would say that's one of the biggest issues. Now, Uranus here, which we've already spoken about tonight, is all about the energy of channeling, shocks, surprises, inspiration, and it can be really quite magical and quite innovative, but it can create chaos. And so having Uranus coming over this part of the chart is quite difficult, because the descendant represents our relationships. And so it can represent that all of the people that you're in relationships at the moment are seeming different. Uranus does things differently. So you might find that you're personal relationships start to feel not so reliable. But you might also find, and hopefully that's not what you're experiencing, that your personal relationships with your honeys and whatnot are unstable or irresponsible or anything like that. But with Uranus coming over here, you might be having people coming into your life who say they're going to do one thing and who are doing completely the opposite. So you've got the shocks that are coming from other people. Now, in this particular chart as well, my friend has got their moon right on this as well. So it's not just that they've got their Uranus over their descendant, she's also got Uranus right over her moon. That's also very, very tricky. And a lot of people seek out astrological advice at this time. When you've got a big planet going over your moon, that's your psyche, it's your emotions, it's your your emotional resilience. So, I mean, what I have shared previously is that there are times when we need to go more inwards, and there are times when we're back up and when we're growing and when things are flowing again. And this is just a really tight time, and this is like one of these times where it just looks like, oh God, how can it get any better than this? Because we've got to just keep reminding ourselves that this too is going to pass. It is going to pass, but it just seems relentless at the moment. Once Saturn clears this point, and so I do need to just check with my friend if I've got the right chart. Were you born at 1:55 p.m. or was it slightly the other chart? I really can't quite remember. But once Saturn clears this area and is in the fourth house itself and not retrograding over it, once this happens, then Saturn, yes, it could actually start to help you build your home, rebuild your home, focus on your home. But whilst it's dancing around this angle, it's kind of running out of steam, and it's pretty tricky. And once Uranus passes this, some of the shockingness of people is going to clear. Obviously, right now we've also got Mercury retrograde, and Mercury retrograde is here in the 6th house, and Mercury has just been right over her Chiron, and Chiron is about our wounds and our upsets. And so where people haven't been as straight, where people have been unreliable and not keeping their promises, I suspect it's actually felt a lot more personal than it probably was meant to be. With Mercury going retrograde over her Chiron, it would have brought up a lot of old stuff about where people had let her down before. So you may well find that some of the old stories of people who've let you down and who say they're going to do one thing and then don't, that it's a catalogue of errors. I do genuinely believe that once these planets start moving off these really sensitive areas, things will straighten up. I suspect you've attracted people into your world as well who've got charts matching the level of chaos that this planet here is suggesting, because these never happen alone. I really would say, to put it not into context, because I'm not trying to pussyfoot around or trying to make you say turn your smile upside down. No, turn your upside down smile the right side up. I'm not trying to say that. But when I've had Saturn and Uranus going over my 2 points, and they were there pretty much all last year, Carl had his, so this is my husband, he had Uranus going over this point and Saturn going over this point. So like I said, when we have one of these things going on, there's usually someone partnering us in it. When I saw this coming, I thought, oh God, are we going to survive this? This looks quite difficult because, in my chart, it was showing up as somebody irresponsible or somebody who seemed radically different. And where he had his radically different planet going over the part of his career, he was going more self-employed and thereby becoming less reliable in the short term. And of course, by comparison, my fears about our security were showing up as Saturn being over his descendant, because I was showing up as somebody being overly cautious and a bit quiet and a bit reserved. And so that's how it's playing out for us. the chances are the people involved in the situations that you've described have got a Uranus thing going on themselves. So I think as this shifts, it will start to improve. Now, Jenny here has also got these planets in the ninth house. Now, the ninth house is known as being really important for philosophy, spirituality, religion, ideas worth sharing, but also publishing and also law. Law is one of these things, and often it shows up in a place of things like legal things that are going on. Now, we've got Mars changing signs. When does he change signs? Hang on one sec. Is it the 21st of this month? But Mars is going over your Jupiter very soon. When is that? Next week on the 15th. Actually, like in a week's time and pretty much all of next week, it looks like a slightly more inflamed time. It's really important to hold your nerve during that time because Mars has just gone into your ninth house, which is all legal and very much about belief systems. And Mars is a warrior. Mars wants to fight and create an issue. So you've got this in the ninth house, and your ninth house is massive. So next week looks slightly inflamed, which is the negative side of Jupiter, but it could absolutely give you the impetus to feel stronger and to appeal and make very, very clear what's going on. I'm just looking to see when Mars clears out of this area to give you an idea of when things might be slightly more straightforward. So Mars is going into the sign of Virgo on the 10th of July, and then has gone over your midheaven. If I've got the time of 1:55 right, if not, just message me, and I will, amend that. But he will have gone out of this whole area by the 1st of August. So I think what is going on right now is going to really highlight all the differences and bring out all the stories and the threads that are going on that need to be attended to. I particularly see the time around your birthday as being quite interesting because you've got Saturn there as well. And that is, say the 13th, 14th, 15th. And 16th of July seems particularly nitty gritty and laborious. So what I would do is do all you can to support yourself, get as much support as you can from people who you can trust. By the time that is going on, by the time Mars has cleared this area, you'll also have the sun have gone through this area. So it's like Mars is kind of setting the scene and saying, like, put up your fists. Let's talk about this, and it's kind of fronting each other down, but it will be followed after by Venus and the Sun and Mercury. Venus is going to be quite interesting. I probably do need to talk to you offline about this, but Venus is actually going to be going retrograde right on your Mercury retrograde in the summer. But what I can see is that, like, lots of things are moving into this area of litigation and getting things sorted out. And by the beginning of September, it should get less fighty and a lot more organized. So now I'm going to leave that there because I actually think it'd be better to talk to you in person and just make sure I've got some, your time of birth right. But hopefully that has been helpful anyway. So anyway, that was quite quite an involved show today. I hope this was helpful for anyone that was interested in learning more about my approach to astrology. I want to just say really, really clearly, I'm not the best astrologer. I'm really not the best. I studied in my 20s and I've continued to learn and I've not done it in any organized way at all. I've just picked up books that appealed to me at the time. And then later, as the internet has grown, There's been forums that I used to sit in and send messages to other astrologers and stuff. But really, it's all practice. And I absolutely recommend that if you are fascinated by astrology and the planetary patterns that exist, the best thing you can do is learn about your chart and then start learning about the charts of people around you. So, for instance, when you start a new job, when you move house, make a note of it. I've got spreadsheets full of all the changes that I've been through in life, and quite a few to do with my clients, but also those nearest and dearest to me. And you start correlating the patterns, and that's when you start to get in tune with it. But that said, I still play with it. You know, if my intuition is screaming something else on top of the astrology, I always follow my intuition. So I do think of myself as more of a psychic astrologer rather than a book person. You know, I'm not really the usual mold of an astrologer, but hopefully this is helpful in you interpreting and making sense of your own life too. So anyway, with that in mind, sending you so much love. I'm going to sign off now, but not just before. Let me just say goodbye and have a quick look at the final comments. So, Colleen is saying beautiful and so right on. Planning a trip there in September. It all makes so much sense. I can't wait to schedule a reading with you. Thank you so much, Louisa. You're very, very welcome. Absolutely, it's my pleasure to do that. And I look forward to doing that reading for you as well. And I'll send you that voucher I said I would. Family Months, and hi everyone. Carl here on YouTube. Hello, Carl. Facebook user, really interesting. You're pretty damn good. I don't know who you are, Facebook user, but thank you for joining me. And Facebook user is saying, I went back to past eclipse series of 2020, 2002, 2003, and 2012 and 2015. Massive changes in my life over those times. House moves, divorces. Do you know what? There are definitely times in our life when we seem to have an easier time of it, and definitely times in our life when we have a tougher time of it. And I think when you look through it all, and you can start to see the coding of what was going on at the time, it's nearly always an outer planet like Pluto or Uranus. I think they're the main protagonists. I really, really do. Neptune, it's not so disruptive, but it can be quite insidious. Like Neptune is like just the foundations are just swaying from side to side of your house. It just feels like you can't quite put your finger on what's going on with the Neptune ones. But Pluto and Uranus, they're hard. I had Pluto go over my ascendant, my nodes, my Mars, my Neptune, my Venus, my Mercury, and my Sun, and my Uranus. And it went through most of this within 15 years. And it's so funny because I saw an astrologer and a tarot card, several tarot card readers, and they all said, once you get past this moment around about 36, your life would start to open up. And I had lots of great experiences. I've lived in lots of places. I've had a great life, but they were right, and I was like, 36, you're kidding me. And then all of a sudden, boom, it started to open out and get easier. But we all have these, according to how our chart is written, there will be a time in our life usually where things tend to go wrong and for a while, and it tests us. And we usually do come out at the end, the other side of it. And your Facebook user, you've confirmed it's you, Penny Albertella from Devon in the UK. Hey, thank you. I think it's really useful for you to do that, Penny. Well done for sticking it out and having a good look. Newbie is saying, sushi and wine time. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Willie B saying, thank you. Lots of flowers. I love that. So anyway, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for putting up with me when I went to attend to a child that was a bit upset. And thank you for being so supportive of each other. I absolutely love how, we're all kind of standing strong for each other in this community. It's really beautiful. So anyway, enjoy the rest of your evening and your weekend, and I'll catch up with you another time real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.